Hello and welcome to a new vlog and video in cooperation with ReiseJung. We're taking a look at the third day on board of the Porto Mirante. In this video we're sailing on the most beautiful part of the River Douro. We're starting in Folgosa where we stayed overnight, then we're heading for a brief stop in Porto, and then we continue on to Vega de Terrón in Spain. Here in the animation we can take a closer look at our itinerary today. So we're leaving Folgosa in the morning, sailing past Pinhão, the last bigger town, before we're then reaching the lock of Valera, the second biggest lock on the River Douro. Then we're continuing on to reach the lock of Porto. After that we are stopping in Porto briefly for an excursion, and then we sail on to the highest point of the Douro that we can reach in Vega de Terrón in Spain, where we are arriving in the afternoon. Here you can see our route in total, and we're starting this time quite early in the morning. I woke up quite early and started the day with a nice cup of coffee on the sun deck shortly after leaving Folgosa, because I wanted to do some sports before the breakfast. So I headed into the nice gym, as it has some very nice sports equipment. It's actually pretty nice to use. And then it was time for the regular breakfast. And in the meantime, we have reached Pinhão, the last bigger town on our way. We're gonna stop here on our way back to Porto. We're now in the most beautiful part of the River Douro, with wonderful landscape. We are mainly seeing the vineyards. Already here you can see a lot of vineyards, but it's getting even more later on. And then we're getting closer to the next town called Tua. Tua is pretty small, only 110 inhabitants. But there's another side. We can see the Tua Dam, which was built in 2017 and is 108 meters high. After that we're reaching a very spectacular part of the river where it gets extremely narrow. We have rocks going directly into the water, and on the left and on the right side we have only a couple of meters of space. So that's the reason why it's not allowed to sail on the River Douro in the night. Would be too dangerous to sail here, and it's also the reason why there is this strict schedule with the passages of the locks already being reserved years in advance. Because here it's not possible to meet an oncoming ship, so we're sailing through this part at a certain specific time, and then we wait at one space where it's a little bit wider for the oncoming ship, and then we can continue into the lock, and after the lock the next ship is waiting, and so on and on. That's how it's working here on the Douro. Here we can see the oncoming ship after we waited for quite a while, as we were a bit early, and now we're reaching the lock Valera. The lock Valera is also very spectacular, as it is the second highest lock of the Douro, only 2 meters lower than the Carapatello lock, has a height of 33 meters. It's 83 meters long and around 12 meters wide, so again only a few meters in the front and in the back, and only centimeters to the left and to the right. And in addition also the entrance is pretty tight, so there are also only a couple of meters to the shoreline at the back of the ship, so also that is quite spectacular to go into this lock. Also here you can see how impressively high this lock is, 33 meters of concrete above us. And what I also really liked about this lock are the swallows' nests that you can see on the bridge, and you can watch the birds from the sun deck. After leaving the lock, of course, we are meeting another oncoming ship before we're then going through another very narrow part of the river. In fact, it's so narrow that it had to be widened by hand so that the ships can pass through. Also a very spectacular part of the river, and that's what's typical for the River Douro. Every few minutes you're in a completely different landscape. On this part also the train line is pretty close to the river, and here we can see one of the trains going to Porto, and also the train was greeting us. Here we can see a time lapse of us going through the lock of Valera. So as you can see, especially in the second part, it's going up quite fastly, always a little bit higher than necessary. Then we're going down a few centimeters till we're on the right level, and then we're leaving the lock. And now we can also see the ship going through this narrow part with a beautiful landscape. Just a few minutes later, we are reaching the lowest bridge of the River Douro. It's a railway bridge where the railway line is crossing the river to go to the other side. There are just a few centimeters between the sun deck and the bridge. Therefore, in this moment, it was not allowed to go up to the sun deck. If you already were on the sun deck, you were allowed to remain there, but you had to sit down. And here you can see how it looked from the sun deck, and I think you can clearly see why you were supposed to sit down, because standing up would be a bit dangerous. But this was already the last bridge until we are reaching Pocinho later on. What I really like about the Douro is that all ships are greeting each other with the ship's horn, no matter which company they are sailing for and no matter which company they belong to, all the ships are greeting each other. I really do like this. Once we were approaching the lock of Pocinho, it was time for lunch, which was fantastic again, and then we're going into the lock of Pocinho, which is a bit smaller than the other ones. Second smallest lock with a difference in altitude of around 22 meters, and we could watch the ship going into the lock through the glass roof of the restaurant, which was also a nice new perspective. After a brief stop in Pocinho for some guests to leave the ship and head to a museum where you can see some cave paintings, we're continuing on to Vega de Terrón. Firstly, we're reaching Barca d'Alva on the Portuguese side, and just around 5 minutes later, we're reaching Vega de Terrón on the Spanish side, which is the highest point we can reach on the Douro. There was a meeting of the Skiller fleet, all three ships together, but to be honest, there is nothing you can do in Vega de Terrón. It's just a stop to start excursions. The only thing you can do is either walk to the small village of Barca d'Alva or have a little walk in the nature, which is what we did. The noise you can hear are cicadas, which are very typical for this area. They are incredibly loud, especially if you consider how small they actually are. And it sounds like that there are millions of them, and there are actually millions of them. But the sound you hear is made by one or two cicadas. When you get too close to them, they stop making that noise, and then you actually realize you just hear a couple of them. It actually gets silent when you get too close to one, so that's quite impressive that such a small animal can make so much noises. We just walked up the hill for a few minutes to enjoy a nice view, and then we're walking back to the ship, but we had to wait a little bit before we could head back on board because the ship in the middle, the Riviera Rose, was leaving, so we had to wait until she departed and Porto Mirante docked again. After the hike I had a little break, and then I had a presentation together with Stefan. We were introducing our cruises for the next season and also the upcoming cruises in this season. If you want to do a cruise like this in a beautiful landscape with nice temperatures, next year we're going on the River Rhône in France during the lavender blossom, so that's also gonna be a very interesting cruise. You can find more information on this cruise and all of our other cruises on reisejung.de. In the evening, it was then time for another fantastic dinner, which was amazing as always. I think you can clearly see how lovely the presentation of the food is, and also the taste was very, very good. And then in the evening, it was time for a relaxing evening up on the sun deck with a beautiful sunset. So a nice day is coming to an end. The second day in a row where I was only sailing without any excursions, and usually this would get pretty boring, but here the landscape is so beautiful that it never gets boring. In the next video, we will take a look at day 4 and we will go to Salamanca in Spain. Here you can see when this video will be uploaded and the name of the song. As always, I'd like to say thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to comment, like, subscribe or share the video link. And I hope to see you in my next video or maybe one day on board.